It was in the year of 1933, and Grace and her father were heading southward with their army of gangsters. After leaving Dogville, they had returned to Denver only to find that the mice had been well and truly playing while the cat was away, and new forces had taken over their former possessions. The result was a particularly unappealing retreat that had brought them through the state of Alabama this spring in search of new hunting grounds.
No, they will not admit it, but it's a fact. Deep down inside, there isn't a woman alive who doesn't nurture these fantasies. Whether they involve harems, being hunted through the jungle by torch-bearing natives, however much they go on and on about civilization and democracy, sexy it ain't.
Grace and her father had resumed their legendary discord even as they pulled out of Dogville. And although Grace had been employing the technique of letting things go in one ear and out the other for a pretty long time now, she was, to be frank, somewhat weary of her unbearably overweening daddy, who still believed any nagging woman could be pacified with the good old bouquet of carnations.
I bet you wouldn't have had the guts to talk like that if Mother had been alive.
No. You're right, my girl, I would not.
We're going, boss.
Miss, lady, I talk to you? Can I talk to you? Yes? They gonna whip him. I knew they would. It just ain't true. He ain't stolen nothing. They put that Rhenish wine from Mam's bedside table in his cabin just to give him something to whip him for. That's the law. One bottle and it's whipping. That's Mam's law.
Oh, what are you talking about? Who? Who are they gonna whip?
Timothy.
Why?
That's how they do us slaves.
Slaves?
Yes, ma'am. Surely you heard of slaves. It's what we is at Manderlay. This God-forsaken place. That's how I got out. When a whip is in the offing, they take out a section of the fence.
Listen, Grace. Oh, it's a local matter. It's not for us to poke our noses in.
Why should we not poke our noses in just because it's a local matter?
It's certainly not our responsibility.
You think the Negroes wanted to leave their homes in Africa? Wasn't it us who brought them to America? We have done them a great wrong. It's our abuse that has made them what they are. Untie him.
Stop!
Afraid not, lady. Slavery was abolished 70 years ago. If you won't obey that law of your own accord, we will compel you to do so.
Ma'am, help me get inside. water for ma'am. Act quickly.
Spare me your hypocrisy, you dumb old slave. Get out. Leave us alone.
If you're looking for sympathy, don't expect any from me.
Listen, I'm very old. Unfortunately, dying. I should like to ask you for a favor.
If it involves allowing you to go on exploiting these people like slaves, I'm sorry, I'll just have to say no. No matter how dying you are.
Slavery is over now. I can see that. It had to come one day.
All right. I'll probably refuse you, but you might as well ask.
There's a book under my mattress. I should like you to retrieve it and burn it for me. It would be best for everyone.
I'm sure you think so. But it's my view that anything, no matter what, is best served by being brought out into the open.
I beg you, one woman to another.
Woman to woman makes no difference to me. The sins of the past are sins I cannot and do not wish to help you erase. And now I must leave you. I believe my father's men have unlocked the gates, and now everybody can come and go as they please. Please let everyone else know on the plantation that from now on they can all enjoy the same freedoms as any other citizen of this country. If the Constitution can be found at any courthouse. And here's a tip for when you sue the family. There's a weighty written evidence concealed in this very room.
She dead? The old devil. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean it, Missy.
No, if any of us deserves an apology, it's not me.
I'm afraid.
There's nothing to be afraid of. We've taken all the family's weapons.
No. I'm afraid of what will happen now. I feel we ain't ready for a completely new way of life. At Manderlay, we slaves took supper at 7. When do people take supper? When they're free. We don't know these things.
Free men eat when they're hungry. Free women as well.
Considering the times and the situation, Grace's words in the dead woman's room on meal times for free citizens might have seemed a trifle over-spirited. We should not believe that there lay any contempt in these words for the wretched and starving people of America. Grace rejoined the gangsters, who had indeed concluded their disarmament of the plantation's powers that had been, though their findings were meagre: the shotgun and an old toy pistol.
All right, we can go.
Well, let's just wait a moment.
What are you waiting for?
For them to come and thank you? Or for them to burn the whole place down and dance some tribal dance on the ruins by the glow of the torchlight?
You are a bigot, Daddy. And you always have been. We owe these people. We brought them here. We abused them. We made them what they are.
I admit, I don't do deals with the Japs. Can't trust them when there's big money at stake, but a bigot?
Well, why don't they come out?
That's exactly what you said last time.
Last time?
Remember when you were 6? You thought it was so sad that your beloved Tweety was all shut up in a cage. And nobody could persuade you not to let him out.
Tweety was a proud little bird.
Well, his dignified exit didn't do Tweety a hell of a lot of good. We found him the next morning underneath your window, frozen to death.
I know. He'd been bred as an indoor bird. He really didn't have a chance.
And what do you think those Negroes in there are? How many generations do you think those families made their homes behind that fence? I bet you most of them have taken up employment in their former jobs with the family, contracts and all. Of course, now they'll get a few dollars for their efforts, but they'll soon drink that up. And maybe they'll borrow a bit more from their employers, who have no doubt opened a little store full of colorful wares just for them. And of course, they'll never be able to pay back the money, and they'll be trapped yet again. What you did was all very noble, my girl, but when push comes to shove, you've just made everything far worse, just as you did with Tweety. So, all we can do is hope there's no frost.
Wait, what you said about contracts and loans, that's fraud.
Fraud.
See, I've read that
Yes.
freed slaves are given a mule and a plot of
Yes.
land so that they can
Yes.
establish themselves.
Yep, that's true, but when it came down to it, the fellow who owned the mule and the land had rather keep it all for himself, so nothing really ever happened with it.
Anyhow, it may take them a while to gather the evidence against the plantation for when the family goes on trial.
Trial? Tater pie. There are times when you seem even less with it than your dear mother. No, I seem to have underestimated him. We've at least one man with a genuine thirst for freedom, and he's getting out and he's in a hurry. Yeah, he's hightailing it all right. Yeah, it's Gramps.
Pardon me.
Not a lot of dignity there. He's scared out of his wits.
Would it be possible to have a word with the young lady?
Yes.
Don't mean to inconvenience you.
That's exactly what you're doing.
You're not inconveniencing anyone. This is a grave day for everyone, I know that.
I just thought we must have seemed a mite bit ungrateful. I should like to thank you properly for what you've done. It'll only take a moment.
Yes, of course.
10 minutes, and then I'm gone. Not a second longer.
Grace was conducted through the wretched living quarters bestowed upon the slaves with their pitiful, leaky cabins. Her actions would comprise an unconditional enrichment of these people's lives. There was no doubt about that. Or was there? Actually, Grace did not see much of the glow she had hoped for. The glow that could have convinced her that no one would end up like her little pale yellow canary. These were human beings, but of the kind on whom pain had been inflicted, Grace thought, as she was suddenly interrupted by a strangely exotic accent.
When we were slaves, we were not required to offer thanks for our supper and for the water we drank and the air we breathed.
No, nobody needs to say thank you. But
But what? I mean, there's something we ought to be thankful for?
I didn't mean but, I meant and. And there's no reason to be grateful for anything as natural as your freedom. I'm the first to apologize for everything you and your people have been subjected to. See, those gates should have been unlocked 70 years ago.
Only 70 years ago. But before that, of course, they were completely justified.
No. No, you misunderstand me. What can I say?
You need say nothing at all. We've heard of your kind. A society lady who spends her time rescuing wretched niggers.
I should like to say thank you. Mr. Dunn give her time and effort to helping us. Time I bet she could have spent on all kinds of different things. 'Cause it was perfect justice when God made some of us slaves, but not others. The Negro is vile by nature. Well, I know it ain't popular to say so. And it ain't 'cause of Bert that I say so.
No, Victoria did not base her perception exclusively on her experience of her husband, though God knows it weighed heavily. Bert was a useless Egypt, whose character Victoria, regrettably so far in vain, had done her best to improve by hitting him with any implement to hand on any given occasion, no matter how much he had threatened to take his own life by throwing himself into Manderlay's deep well. Grace looked at Willem, the old house slave, and understood. He had not brought her here for anybody to thank her. He just wanted her to see them all. The unfortunate flock that he very rightly feared would have few chances beyond the perimeter fence. Living proof of the devastating power of oppression.
Listen up.
Sir?
It's all been put on paper. Just needed to check the wording first, being as these things are legal and binding. Bingo.
What are these?
Hardly know.
They're the contracts, ma'am.
You never left the family.
The family has been so considerate to offer us all employment.
Grace was not a lawyer and unqualified to assess the validity of the contract she held in her hand. But she feared that, unfortunately, any judge in the county would deem it fair and proper. It appeared to Grace that instead of employee, they might just as well have retained the old term of slave. A body would only sign it if he or she was utterly ignorant of life in liberal society, or if he or she really had no choice.
Folks, I suppose that you're in urgent need of cash, Mark?
Cash? I once knew this fella from a little township nobody know the name of. So there ain't no grounds to mention what it was called. He had cash, not piles of it.
We are prepared to lend you some money. That's covered by this other piece of paper. And we can also set up a little store here, if you like. After all, it's a long way to town.
And if you buy enough for all of us, I bet you're liable to get a real nice bulk discount. And the goods will be cheaper than in town. Ain't that right, Miss Grace?
I have no idea.
Please sign, everybody.
What this be? What it is?
All right, let's go.
Turn it off.
Damn it.
Daddy, you said that I didn't have the power to help Tweety. You were right. I was a child then.
So what is it this time?
This time I have the power to act. You said so back in Dogville, that your power would be mine too, and that I could use it in my own way.
That power was to carry on the family firm. That I was open to new ideas. The power you ask for now will undoubtedly be applied to something that's foolish at best.
Daddy, you promised. You were a bastard to Mother, but when you promised her something, she got it.
Okay. You've been given what I promised you. Maybe things haven't been split right down the middle, but this is as far as I'm prepared to go. I want nothing to do with your plans. And you won't be able to get in touch with me if anything goes wrong and you need me, as usual, to get you out of trouble because, fortunately, my dear, you'll have no idea where I am.
Daddy, I'd like to take Joseph as well.
No.
I need a lawyer to sort out some paperwork.
No. No! Never! Never! I'd never let Joseph go. He's the only man I know who can draw up a contract, so there's only one possible interpretation. And though I haven't needed that talent as of yet, I still might need it one day.
I'll give you Vigo and Bruno for him.
Never. I've given you my best associates, and you know it!
Daddy, I was meant to have been given half. If Mother had been alive.
Oh, damn it, Grace!
So, that very day, and into the early hours, Joseph employed the celebrated, unambiguous phrases his previous employer had given him so wretchedly little opportunity to practice. New contracts needed drawing up, and old ones needed nullifying. All with the astonishing goodwill that parties always evince in the company of rapid-firing machine pistols.
These are the deeds of gift. You transfer the property to the former slaves in joint ownership. The last document is your contract of employment by this community.
Employment? I don't quite get what you mean by that.
It'll be without pay, and the right of termination is rather one-sidedly in the hands of the employer, but nevertheless.
Manual labor. For you and your family and Mr. Mays. Hard labor.
Say something, Bingo.
My father's back ain't so strong. He climbed up to reach the chandelier one Christmas day, and he fell off the banister and struck a table.
Well, that's what happens when you've got chandeliers. When I consider that your understanding of the worth of other human beings has reached the desirable stage, you and Mr. Mays and your family will be allowed to go.
Go? And leave our home?
Yes. And I assure you that even starting from scratch, your prospects will be a lot better than your former labors would have been. With regards to the presence of me and my men, we'll only act as your counselors. The guns are merely a precaution in case of any threats to the new community. We intend to stay here, but only until the first harvest is home, after which any of the new shareholders who wishes to do so may cash in his or her deed of gift and receive a dividend.
All right, will you collect your deeds? Mark?
Nobody was particularly enthusiastic or confident about these late-night legal formalities.
Victoria. Flora.
But Grace could see beyond this. And if she saw little else than fear and disquiet in all these eyes,
Sammy.
At least she saw gratitude in one single pair, namely in Willem's mild old gaze.
Bert. I got a deed of gift here that ain't been accepted. Will Mr. Burt approach forthwith and take delivery of his deed of gift? Mr. Burt. Mr. Burt.
Burt had actually prepared his escape from his ferocious wife. Despite her lack of faith in his abilities, Burt had succeeded in meeting a woman through the fence, and she had agreed to help him to abscond. And there he was, waiting at the agreed place at the agreed time. A helping hand, the woman had said. What a peculiar coincidence that two women should come to the aid of the Manderlay slaves at the same time. Grace and Bert's helping hand. And the similarities between them were also peculiar. Young, beautiful, white, in male company. Actually, male company in alarming numbers. Grace had moved into the Freed plantation among its new shareholders. She was there as a guard, no more. But no one could stop her from using this beautiful spring to make her own little observations on the people of Manderlay, in the hope of spotting the burgeoning change in character that freedom ought to bring. But, unfortunately, she saw little of just that. She saw Victoria for the third time looking down the well in hope of a glimpse of the body of Bert. She saw Flora and Elizabeth swooning for Timothy as ever. She saw the men spending their time on card games, playing for tufts of blue cotton under their leaking roof. And she saw how everybody would ignore the eager Mark whenever he opened his mouth, not knowing that he was notorious for never being able to give an intelligible answer to anything.
Well, we called him Puddinhead. His real name wasn't Puddinhead.
Grace saw Victoria beating her eldest son for stealing a mouldy cookie. And she saw the unstoppable, irrevocable hierarchy of the beatings. Victoria beating Ed, Ed beating Milton, and Milton Willie, who finally vented his frustration further down the food chain on Claire, who far too rarely managed to make use of the window with the outside handle that her loving father Jack had installed as an emergency entrance, which also allowed her to fall asleep every night to her favorite view of the twinkling stars. Every noontide, Grace witnessed with pity how the former slaves were arrayed on the parade ground with its mysterious numbers and marks beneath Ma'am's balcony, as if nothing at Manderlay had changed. However, one of them did not submit to this all-too-soothing power of habit. Timothy, of course. In a flash, his exotic pride almost took Grace's breath away. This day, Grace walked on past the old Peach House, where the Whites were now detained, put to work on sundry more or less needless little repairs, on her way to the barn housing her gangsters.
So how's everyone doing?
I'm afraid the men got nothing to do, and it's not so good for the morale. In situations like that, your father always came up with something.
I bet he did. But it's patience that's required.
Not this much patience, Neil says. Neil's grandpa was a cotton grower, and he says the cotton should have been sown ages ago.
The soil doesn't look ready.
Might be because nobody's plowed it.
Well, maybe things are different here from where your grandpa lives.
No, ma'am. Don't reckon so.
Well, if it should have been sown, surely the people here will be the first to know.
As she did not want to impose, Grace's intercourse with the former slaves had been limited to brief greetings and the like. But now it was time for a talk with some meat to it.
Excuse me, sir. Mark, may I ask you something? It's about planting the cotton.
I've been around for sowing and harvesting and birth and death.
Right. So when should the cotton be planted?
There's strict rules for that. You can't mess around with that sort of thing. Manderlay has always been renowned for the precision of its harvest. The swallows always migrate right afterwards. They settle here for the night, on their way across the marshes.
But the planting?
It's a science, my dear lady. And the weather, which you might have expected, plays a fearsome role.
Yes, yes. And when will it be time this year?
Not too soon, and not too late.
Yes, but when? Should the cotton have already been planted?
I'm not the sort of fella to pass on information unless I'm damn sure of it. Lest the facts of the matter are 100%. In other words, the facts need be beyond dispute.
Do you know when to plant?
No.
I better ask Willem. Is he in his cabin?
This morning he went down to the bathhouse. He'd gotten a little frayed around the edges, as they say. It's a funny thing, you know.
I'm sorry. I'll go find him myself. Excuse me, Willem. I've come about the fields.
The fields should have been plowed and harrowed 3 weeks ago. The cotton planted 2 weeks ago.
But does everybody know that?
Oh, yes. But I reckon they thinking somebody else ought to go out into the field first. In the old days, Overseer Mays would have driven us out there. Maybe it's because nobody really trusts you, Missy.
Yeah. But Willem, they could be doing something else instead. Repairs to their homes. They badly need it.
The cabins have always been a sore spot. The man said we ain't got no materials to fix them up.
But we're going to need what we make on the cotton. How else will people survive on their own?
Yeah. If folks felt they was given something brought out by these new times that made their lives better in a convincing way, right here and now. And I don't know what that might be, but...
But we don't have time for that.
We've been forced to sow late before. Harvest might be improved if we planted a bit late. Even says that in Ma'am's law.
Ma'am's law?
Yes, Ma'am's law. It's all the rules for running the plantation. We weren't allowed to read it. It's just for Ma'am and the family.
Only for Ma'am and the family, Grace thought. Certainly no more. And there on Ma'am's bed, skimming through the old book well filled with bizarre and vicious regulations, she came upon a page that looked strangely familiar. A table with numbers from 1 to 7. Somewhere, Grace had seen something similar, for sure. Ma'am's law revealed it all. The Manderlay plantation, with its glamorous front mansion and pitiful rear where the slaves had their quarters, had been kept in an iron grip by these very numbers. They represented the psychological division of the Manderlay slaves. Sammy was a Group 5, a clowning nigger. The formidable Victoria was, of course, a number 4, a hidden nigger. No wonder her husband, Bert, had found it necessary to accept a helping hand, even if it was another colour from his own. Wilma and Mark were loser niggers. Willem was a 2, a talking nigger. Flora was a weeping nigger, etc., etc. There were pleasing niggers and crazy niggers by the dozen. The final category, number 1, proudy niggers, consisted nowadays of Timothy, as expected, who was of course not there. And Elizabeth? No, it said 7, not 1. She was a pleasin' nigger, also known as a chameleon, a person of the kind who could transform herself into exactly the type the beholder wanted to see. This was how the slave system had been kept alive for so long at Manderlay. Bondage, even through psychology. As Grace, in deep thoughts, gazed across the fields of Manderlay, she recalled another page in Ma'am's law, dealing exclusively with the weeding of the paths in the romantic old lady's garden, the name of the narrow band of woodland that skirted the plantation. Trees and tree trunks, Grace thought. So there were materials at Manderlay after all.
Excuse me. May I ask you all something? Isn't it true that somebody who's even poor and colored can still take the trouble to maintain their home?
How dare you? Do you think colored folks prefer holes in their roofs and wallowing in mud?
Well, then all you need to do is to mend those holes.
But I told you, there ain't never been the materials for that kind of thing at Mandalay.
No materials? I mean, that's not true. When I'm in the fields, I see timber wherever I look, just waiting to be turned into boards for a roof, or an extension, or maybe even a whole new cabin.
That be Ma'am's garden. You can't cut that down.
Then why can't we cut down the old lady's garden? Have you really spent that many happy hours up there on your knees weeding her romantic paths?
That's true. There's loads of timber. We ain't seen it as anything but the old lady's garden. I don't know what you think, but to me it sounds like a splendid idea.
And at a stroke, these seated, reclining, resting people had turned into people going full tilt. Walking, running, working people, without anyone having to threaten them in the slightest with the lady's hand, as Grace had been told the Great Whip was called. And Grace had won a kind of victory, a small beginning of something that would one day erase all the negative inherited behavior patterns of Manderlay. But, as Grace had suspected, the appetite for improving the living quarters unfortunately exceeded that for preparing the fields. A few of the former slaves had volunteered, and with the White family and Grace herself, they made up a sort of gang to prepare the soil for the seeds, under the gaze of a demonstratively hostile Timothy with his mysterious white handkerchief.
He wasn't born here?
He's a Munsee. It's a line of African royalty. It's a very proud line. He don't drink either, or gamble like the others be doing, with their little blue tufts of cotton money. It was Ma'am's law. We weren't allowed no real money.
Grace knew about the clever system of currency in Ma'am's law. Not real money that you could use in the outside world.
The Munsee don't gamble because they don't believe in winnings. They believe you have to be humble to your crops and only take what's absolutely necessary.
I've never heard of these Muncie before, but I do believe I once heard of the Mansi.
They different. They was slaves of African kings. They gamble. And there's true mischief, Timothy say.
So Timothy has prejudices as well.
What?
Oh, nothing. I was just thinking aloud.
So you find company, Flora?
Oh, no. I was on my way out anyway. Timothy, let me tell you one thing. I know you don't like me and don't trust me, and I can see why. Although our ideals differ, you have a pride within you that I believe will one day be the salvation of everybody at Manderlay.
Let me tell you one thing, too. You got fine words, a posse of gangsters, and your white skin. Something folks here seem to fall for, but I ain't fooled. You're not interested in us. Not as human beings. After all, it's tough telling people apart when they're from another race.
We whites have committed an irreparable crime against an entire people. Manderlay is a moral obligation because we made you.
Luckily, I'm just a nigger who don't understand such words. And now, if you'll excuse me, I've come here for the company of my girl. And that ain't nothing for you to see. Black Heights meeting. And if I were you, I would leave now, before things get too nasty.
Grace regarded Timothy's hostility as a challenge, and the very next day, she took a step to dispel his claim that as a white, she was incapable of caring for blacks as individuals. She had had a chat to Venus about her somewhat maladjusted son, Jim, and Venus had revealed that Jim's behavior was merely that of a budding but frustrated artist.
Tell me, have you seen Venus?
Nobody here wants your charity.
I have something for Jim. I've had a really good look at his face since our little chat, and you're right. It does possess an artist's sensitivity.
This is far too much.
No. Go on, call him. These are for him.
Jim, come on out here to me and Miss Grace, baby.
These are for you. Because we believe in you. Now run along and paint your fantastic pictures. And never mind those close-minded folks who think they know what art is meant to look like. Give them hell from me, Jim.
Excuse me, but I ain't Jim. I'm Jack. That's Jim.
It is tricky. As a matter of fact, I've never been able to tell them apart either. They're both colored and they both got curly hair. Well, look any deeper than that.
To be honest, Grace had never been quite sure which was Jim and which was Jack. A blunder that would in her former life among her fellow whites merely have occasioned a little laughter.
Thank you, ma'am.
In her life at Manderlay, it was disastrous. But like her father, she did not take long to transform a defeat into anger, energy, and a counterattack.
This is what has created all this resistance. Even you regard it as almost sacred, don't you?
I must admit it's played a right, important part in my life.
That will be my next move. They shall be allowed to see it. To understand that I can't do them any more harm.
I wouldn't advise it, Missy. Presenting it to them would be like showing the child the rod where we've just been beaten. I agree it must be made public, but we ain't all right for it.
All right. Then we shall have to see about ripening you, and quickly. And I'm not talking about the couple of cozy meetings I've organized to which hardly anybody turned up. I mean teaching with a timetable, old-fashioned hands-on schooling. All right. I've got something for you to do at last. And it even involves bossing people about it. At noon tomorrow, I'm going to give my first lesson to all of the former slaves of Manderlay. And it'll be your job to make sure that they're there. No excuse for not showing up.
And the family?
No. They're pretty well teaching themselves. Are you listening to me?
It's because Niels just got a great hand.
What? Who are you?
My name is Dr. Hector. Do excuse me a moment. I'll have to, pay my way out of this round. God knows I don't believe you possess any cards of real significance. You have a poker player's face. You see here my entire enterprise. I must say I've never gained access to Manderlay before. So when I drove by today, I saw the gates were open. I took it as a sign of new times.
What exactly do you do?
I entertain. Party games, card games, and the like. Well, nowadays, mainly the latter.
You play for money.
Oh, but I do more than play. I cheat.
And you have no objections to revealing this business secret of yours?
Oh, some people, but not to you. No, you see, if you and I establish the business relationship I'm anticipating, you'll be happen to know exactly what to expect.
And what can I expect?
80%. Now, you certainly know all the problems that arose when that our beloved New Deal was imposed in '65. Plantation owners had plenty of land, but nobody to work it. So they contracted with the former slaves. But they just didn't have the same hold on the rascals that they had in the old days. Of course, they lent them money, but quite a few of the niggers actually saved up, paid off the debts. So the plantation owners got worried.
Bet they did.
Oh, yes. See, that's where my idea came in. I went from plantation to plantation with the full backing of the plantation owners to entertain the employees. And they were sorely in need of diversion, let me tell you. We just had a little game of cards. And if anyone was close to repaying his debt, I would take the shirt off their back. And I am prepared to offer you that very same service today, man. You are not convinced. Let me give you another token of my profound loyalty. I have here a letter. A man by the name of Stanley. He asked me to smuggle it out. Thought perhaps you'd like to see it before it's mailed.
Listen, Mr. Hector. Let me just say that I have never met a man whom I have instantly despised so wholeheartedly, both for his personality and his occupation.
Does that mean you're turning down my offer?
I never want to see you here again.
All right. Well, I am disappointed. I shall nevertheless bestow upon you my thought for the day. I indulge in word games. I like to give my clients something to laugh or think about when I leave. Best technique for a card shop is dealing from the bottom. Look as if you're dealing from the top of the deck, but instead you just take the bottom card, one that you know. You take them from the bottom means something else entirely in social terms, but it is what I do. I take from the bottom. Won't be hard to find me if you change your mind.
The letter was aimed at a Mr. Miller, one of the truckers who picked up cotton from Manderlay, and the plantation's only real contact with the outside world. It was short and to the point. We are being held prisoner by gangsters and coloureds at Manderlay. Inform the police and please come to our aid with all due dispatch. Indignation is a rare emotion for a gangster, but a state of just that was what Grace's men experienced while they herded the coloured people in for their lesson that day, as Grace had reported on Dr. Hector's cheap trick of taking from the bottom. It was hardly the sophisticated ambiguity of the term that had affected them so dramatically.
Welcome to our lesson. Yes, I call it a lesson, as the term meeting seems to have scared some people out of attending.
I was coming, but I was late.
Very late. You hadn't made it by the time we finished.
In the old days, we could hear the bell from the old clock in the hall. Well, it was easy to keep up with time, but we never hear it no more.
Probably because nobody winds it up. But now for the topic of this lesson. Working together. Only 4 people from your wing helped to prepare the fields, and only 5 helped to plant. I'm not a shareholder in this enterprise, but if I had been, and if I had also been one of the 5, I would have felt cheated. Democracy means government by the people. But as it's not practical for everyone to sit in Congress, a method by which people may express their views is required. This method is called a ballot. All right? So let's try it out. We should choose a problem. Anything anyone can't decide on?
If I may suggest a small matter.
Please do.
I reckon the little broken rake is mine, but Flora reckons it's hers.
It's my rake.
Well, that's an excellent suggestion. It's a great example. I assume you all know of this dispute, and all feel able to have an opinion on it? Who does the community think owns the rake? It could turn out to belong to both parties equally. Now that would correspond nicely with the subject of this lesson. Working together, sharing together. All right, so who thinks it's Elizabeth's rake? Sammy.
I think it's Elizabeth's rake.
All right.
Slowly, the point of Grace's edifying discourse dawned on the majority. Most of them thought the rake was definitely Elizabeth's, a few that it was Flora's, and nobody that it could be shared.
Still remain undecided whether the rake is Elizabeth or Flora.
Right, so not
Or
too
maybe
surprisingly, neither party receives Mark's vote. From now on, the little broken rake belongs to Elizabeth. That's what ballots are like. There are winners and there are losers. But the community has spoken.
And now Grace embarked on a protracted explanation of Flora's difficulties raking without a rake, and that owning things together could have its advantages.
Anything else?
To make sure that everyone understood the democratic principle, the meeting carried out another ballot at Jim's suggestion.
I want to talk about the fact that Sammy be laughing so loud at his own jokes, and they ain't funny. And I'm trying to get some sleep, and I can't get no sleep because he laughs so loud.
Yes.
Maybe perhaps there can be a time when he can stop his jokes and stop laughing so he can get some sleep.
You can't vote on a man's laughter. You can't vote on a man's laughter, surely.
I'm hearing that it's at sundown. At sundown. That's what I'm hearing for. So let's do a vote. All right, so that's settled.
Well,
Yeah.
Yeah, it is.
It is. That's democracy.
Finally, Willem proposed that it would be practical if somebody was responsible for winding up the clock with its small but penetrating chimes. And for mysterious reasons, the probing, though fairly passive artist Jim was appointed, despite the song and dance his mother kicked up. Grace wound up the lesson by announcing that the topic for the next day would be our anger and how to communicate it.
Maybe somebody would at least tell me what the time is.
We'll ask Timothy. He always know what time it is. He tell by the sun. He always do that.
Oh, we can always ask Willem. He's so old, he's from before the clock ever got here.
So Willem and Timothy each made his own suggestion as to what the time was, and they were astonishingly close. Willem thought it was 8 minutes to, Timothy thought it was 5 minutes to, and Grace rejoiced quietly at this natural ability they found so straightforward. But rapidly 2 factions emerged. One which insisted it was 8 minutes to, and the other would not hear of anything but 5 minutes to. And they were thus able to draw on the day's learning and put it to the vote. The result was 5 minutes to, by a small majority. And so it was decided. The official time at Manderlay was 5 minutes to 2. Grace's first lesson of the day took place in relative good humour, but the second one, the one that had unfortunately proved unavoidable, was severer in character.
Read.
Daily ration of food for slaves from Category 7. Oh no, 1. Is
6 ounces of solid food. And they've always been given just that, no matter how little there was in the stores.
That's a lot less than Category 7, for example. Why should a proudy nigger have less to eat than an eye-pleasing one? How can the way your head seems to be arranged have anything to do whatsoever with the amount people are given to eat?
I really don't know either. Not precisely. Do you, Mr. Mays?
Well, it could be just to punish them for their pride.
No, I just did what it said.
It mattered a lot to my mother that we follow these rules. I know of many places where everybody got quite a bit less than 6 ounces, and where they began to eat dirt. It's the kind of custom colors have when food's scarce around here. But it was forbidden under Ma'am's law.
That's not what we're discussing here. Don't you see what an affront it is to divide people up like that?
Folks is different. Oxen or rabbits don't need equal shares of fodder neither. Both parties will come down with a bellyache.
Stop. All right, I'm not at all satisfied with what I've heard here today. You're all speaking up for this foolishness. I'm going to have to penalize you, because so little effort has been made in these lessons.
That evening, Grace thought that her idea of making the whites make up their faces, which had seemed so just and edifying in her flash of anger that afternoon, was perhaps a tad too much in the wrong direction.
Hey, Jenny.
Even though Philomena herself in her own childhood would not have dreamt of going to the toilet without the entertainment of her black nanny.
Look at your Uncle Jim. He's in the bathtub, learning how to swim.
we clean our faces now?
Yes, yes, of course.
Well, here comes the dust. Then none of this will matter anymore.
What do you mean?
There's gonna be a dust storm. Plants have only just begun to grow. Couldn't be worse.
But Manderlay's fields have never been harmed by a dust storm.
Because the windbreak was still in place.
Grace was not inclined to go into what the former overseer meant by these mysterious words, and soon she had convinced herself that they had no meaning at all, apart from spreading disquiet and despondency. The next day's lesson on the importance of unleashing one's anger met little understanding from the assembly.
No.
It was when they wound up with a series of ballots, and the community had rapidly decided to use Wilma's potatoes for seed, as she was so old and did not have to eat that much, that they heard the wind.
May have this kid, but they
Jack, where you going?
She want to get Lucifer.
The dust had come at this time for as long as anybody could remember. But every year, from time immemorial, it had spared the newly planted cotton as the plantation had been cleverly shielded by a narrow band of trees, known in common parlance as the old lady's garden. In the midst of the almost biblical darkness that descended on Manderlay, Grace knew all too well that even hand in hand with all the races of the world, no army of gangsters could counter this. Nature's extravagant demonstration of power. All she could do was watch as row upon row of the seedlings she had so welcomed disappeared beneath the devastating dust. Nobody could do a thing. But apparently it did not mean that no one would try. For now Grace discerned a rider out there. He was riding like crazy. As he progressed across the fields, wherever he spotted a pile of dust beginning to grow, he would break it up with his horse's hooves. Whether it would make the slightest dent in the grand scale of things was hard to tell, but it was a battle, no matter how senseless it might be, heroic and dangerous.
Timothy.
Come back! Come back! Timothy! Timothy!
Timothy's gonna be all right. He knows these storms. Miss Grace, use head over heels for him. He's a fool, Miss Grace.
Where'd you find him?
He was behind the house.
Is he alive?
I do believe I know what you mean by that question. But what does it mean to be alive?
I mean, is he breathing? Oh, forget it. Is he dead?
We color folks can be awfully hard to kill if we want it that way.
That very afternoon, strong Timothy was back on his feet surveying the buildings for damage caused by the storm. The dust had struck a devastating blow. Unfortunately, hardest hit were the food stores and the dilapidated peach house which had lost its roof. Almost all of their provisions were now inedible. On top of that, the pneumonia brought by the dust was inevitable. The dust had got in everywhere, particularly where no new boards could have provided weatherproofing, namely through the cracked glass in the window on the stars above Claire's bed. Valuables, not to mention cash, were non-existent at Manderlay. Since the elegant clock miraculously still ticking merrily away on the mantelpiece turned out to be not Swiss, as Mam believed, but a copy made quite locally and worth practically nothing. The freed enterprise of Manderlay was bust. Willem and Grace were therefore under no illusions that anybody would attend class this day. But then, one by one, the Manderlay flock began to appear.
I'm happy you're all here. But I don't really have a lecture for you today. I'd just like to say how badly I feel about this hopeless situation. But of course, words aren't much use to you.
No. Missy has learned that much at least. But as regards hopelessness, it is something we do know a bit about. There are 1 million plants out there beneath the dust. If we can save but 50 of them, perhaps we can grow a small quantity of great quality and get a better price for it. I reckon we should make a move.
And that is how the greatest disaster turned into a stroke of luck for Grace, and how the people, with a common foe, the dust, as their excuse, suddenly found themselves working shoulder to shoulder with their deadliest enemy to achieve the common goal as free, grown-up Americans. Stanley and Bertie had sown the fields with little sticks so that people could tell where to uncover the tender seedlings, while Flora, ever so childishly, kept teasing Grace with her digs at Grace's supposed romantic feelings towards Timothy.
Good night, old Wilma.
Good night, Jan. We can lie down and talk for a while before we go to sleep.
No, thank you, Wilma. I'm not weary enough to go to bed yet. A little walk helps.
A walk when a body ain't sleepy is a very good thing. I do the same myself.
Good night.
Night.
That everything seemed as moving along on its own could be nothing but welcomed by Grace. But her lack of an active part to play had suddenly left her in a kind of vacuum and allowed other things inside her to claim attention. Human things like instincts and emotions. An ominous sense of homelessness and loneliness struck Grace this evening. As she wandered about, Grace suddenly found herself outside the wooden rear of the bathhouse. Without warning, the homelessness transferred into a strange desire to move up that rusty pipe, against the flow of dirty water, into where naked bodies were being washed in cheap soap. Black skin, male and black manhood. What Grace had felt at the bathhouse was undignified, shameful. Her mind was meant to be devoted to policy at Manderlay, a matter in which these thoughts had no business whatsoever. Grace had forced herself to sleep to rid her thoughts of those black bodies, an achievement that was actually possible thanks to the stubbornness that flourished in Grace's family. But the cotton seedling in her love-starved body did not give up. It manifested itself as a dream. Grace was in southern climes. There were women in exotic costumes and men in turbans. Even in her sleep, she hated with a passion any idea of allowing that her father might be right. But it was a harem. A group of black slaves appeared, bearing a huge charger piled with dates. And in a twinkling, Grace lay among the dates, trembling with pleasure, as a flock of Bedouins satisfied her one by one with their noses. And it was even more confusing when Timothy appeared, and was both the slave bearing wine, hand shaking, and the sheik himself, whose authoritative hands tested the size of Grace's most intimate orifices.
Must have overslept.
I'm sorry. Claire's had another turn.
Yeah, she's running a bad fever again. Has she had anything to eat?
Oh, sure. Pork chop and baked chicken.
She's taking a little oatmeal, but it's hard to get it into her. She had this trouble with her lungs last year when the dust come too. There's far more dust this year.
Honestly, Miss, you ought to go back home to the clean air and larders full of food.
We're all in this together, no matter how hard it gets.
And hard it will get. I've seen what's left around here. Though some folks are still filling their bellies.
Right. We've got to talk about that. Come on, it'll be all right, Rose. I propose that we ration what we have left and spread our provisions over a month until we can harvest more from the vegetable gardens. And as I hear that there are so very few beans and potatoes left, I think we should give them to Rose, who needs them for Claire. What's left will be shared out equally among the rest of us.
Excuse me.
Mm-hmm.
The rest of us? That goes for us too?
Yes, of course it does.
We've already eaten things your father would never have put up with. Joseph swears they couldn't be described as food at all, legally speaking. Your father used to let us obtain stuff when the coffers were empty. Surely we could steal something from somewhere. But I suppose that's no good either, Miss Grace. I'm afraid you're one tough cookie.
Maybe I am.
Sadly, the most nourishing fare the estate could still provide had not improved Claire's condition much. But she needed meat, and Timothy knew it. And so, henceforth, they would have to do without the loyal old donkey on the treadmill. It was not a good portent of the level of morale that the gangsters were now trying hard to fix the car from the ravages of the dust. But luckily, Joseph, a legal expert with the ability to interpret the most incomprehensible of texts, had met his match in the 1923 Ford Owner's Manual. As time went by, the scattered cotton plants at Manderlay grew side by side with its denizens' hunger, now that the little that was left of the donkey meat was reserved for Claire. And Grace found herself in the peculiar situation of joining Wilma and the other women in what had been completely forbidden under Mam's law, namely the southern tradition of eating dirt.
No, definitely.
Having given up on the automobile manuals, Joseph had found a quaint turn of phrase in the agreement into which he had originally entered with Grace's father regarding his employment. The wording could, with a little goodwill, be interpreted to mean that certain circumstances obliged an employee to obey a higher authority than his boss. The authority, in this case, being his stomach. The good news was that although the drought had been hard on the fields, Stanley and Timothy had invented a weapon to deploy against it.
Wait.
Yeah. Watch out, it's coming. It's coming.
Come on, man. Now, I didn't think of that before. I love to watch you go. We can also go.
But the best news of all was Claire, who had miraculously gained so much strength that she could empty her plate of good food. Always in the middle of the night and when everyone was asleep and nobody was looking. But even so. If Grace had thought hunger would put paid to her forbidden sensual fantasies, actually the opposite was more the case.
Flora, what's going on with the chickens? Are they fighting?
You mean the 4 whites after the black? You want I should open the door and have a peek?
No.
Mine, yeah. That little black hen real proud. Wouldn't surprise me if the mothers took the chance to give it an odd peck.
And don't you tease me, Flora.
Not then.
Good night.
Flora had teased Grace before with the little black hen, but they were hurting it in there, no doubt about it. And to make everything far worse, that heat in her loin seemed to come back in spite of that poor chicken's cry for help. Or even intensified by it. Devastated, humiliated, and overcome by fear for her sanity, she fled. And in a fit of madness, or what others would simply call horniness, she threw herself onto her bed on her tummy, and for a moment forgot all about shame and political correctness, and did what she had not done since her childhood, when she had not yet known it was so infinitely wrong. She pressed herself onto the knot she had rapidly and instinctively formed by bunching her quilt. Whether it was pleasurable or painful is hard to tell, but she kept at it. It was beyond her control. With no regard for the sleep of the women around her or common decency in general, the pulsating explosions in her nether regions took over her world. And who knows how it would have concluded had there not appeared at that very moment, fortunately for Grace, a person shaking her back to a reasonable state of self-defense.
Miss Grace, you gotta come quick, Miss Grace.
She's dead. I took such care of her. I fed her the good meat. She been eating. She dead. Dead.
I said, come on.
She been eating.
No, she hadn't been eating. This and had. You gonna tell him, woman?
I was so hungry. I get so dizzy. And my legs hurt when I'm hungry.
Our good friend and Claire's beloved old Wilma been visiting the windowsill while we slept. She emptied Claire's plate every single night. 'Twas easy as pie, considering that there window could be open from the outside.
I eaten so much dirt in my time. Teeth can't take no more.
She killed our little girl.
Jack, she was sick.
Miss Grace.
She was sick, Jack.
Rose didn't worry too much about feeding her during the day, 'cause she ate so much at night. I want Wilma punished for killing my little girl. I want this matter put to the vote. I want Wilma punished for killing my little girl. I want justice. Or I'll kill her myself right now.
Let me know. Stop! We will talk about
She
this.
killed my elbow!
Stop it!
And so, the very next evening, a gathering took place under the magnificent, clear, twinkling, starry sky of Manderlay.
Now we heard them all, Willem. Wilma showed no mercy to our Claire, so no mercy ought to be shown to her. She must die.
Jack. Killing old Wilma won't bring Claire back.
All we want is justice. You said so many times that we're entitled to it.
I propose that she be banished from Manderlay for stealing food in an emergency. She probably won't survive that anyway, as old as she is. After all, we don't know if the matter of the food made any difference at all in Claire's fate.
Wilma can't have known whether it would kill her. But she didn't care a bit when it came to risking somebody else's life, that of our little girl.
All Wilma saw was a plate. Nobody was touching. She was hungry.
What do you think the rest of us was? All of us here ate what we had agreed. What do you think little Claire was? We all hungry. And that just makes it far, far worse.
I'd like to ask y'all to vote on Jack and Rose's motion. All those who believe that Wilma deserves to die, raise your hands.
Thank you. Thank y'all. Stop. Grace? I thought we were the ones who made the decisions here. That's what you always told us. Or maybe it's only sometimes.
Of course not, it's always.
At least the decisions you were here to defend, ain't they? So let me go across and do it.
No. If anybody's going to do it, it's going to be me. It must not be an act of vengeance.
That's all right by me. As long as she suffers as much as Claire.
Well, that'll be up to me. I'll let you know when it's over.
Grace. Be so kind as to tell me what they decide. Am I gonna die?
No, Wilma, you're not going to die.
What do you mean?
I mean, the ballot did not go Jack's way. You're not going to die. See, they didn't think that Claire would have eaten the food on her plate anyway. And anyhow, she'd certainly have died from pneumonia. From the dust.
You really say that?
Yes. They really said that.
If you knew how terrible the waiting was. I'm just so weary.
I know. I know you are. But now you can sleep easy.
Yes. I can.
Lie down and get some sleep.
You are the daughter I might have had.
Lie down.
Will you stay till I sleep?
I'll do that, Wilma. Here. Lie down. Wilma?
Sheep, sheep,
yes, my Lord.
sheep, sheep,
Yes, my Lord.
Harvest time finally did arrive, and the cotton went safe into the sacks. Despite the fewer bushes, the harvest was splendid. It was as if all the trials and tribulations had made the cotton extra white and the fibers extra strong. And even at current prices, it would bring in a record sum. And although nothing was the way it had ever been, the harvest was as precise as always at Manderlay. The moment the last tuft of cotton was in the sack, the swallows arrived, dropping from the skies towards the marshes. Everyone observed the sight in awe, and for a moment it was greater than all the words and politics in the world. The old gin was as ready as ever. It had been for a week, greased and stripped down and reassembled by Sammy, who had teamed up with Niels. They worked well in harness. Niels had never found a joke funny in his life, so Sammy, the clowning nigger, had given up. Not unrelieved, trying to entertain him with his somewhat weak material.
That's fine.
It's fine?
Okay.
All right. You ready for
Grace? Grace?
Edward. God, I hardly recognized you. You certainly changed the way you dress.
Yes, well, your father thought it was time for a change. He's on his way into a new area of business.
Is Daddy here?
No, he just sent me on ahead to give you a message. Your father says he will be by your week Monday at 8 o'clock in the evening. He told me to tell you that he will wait in the car outside the gates for a quarter of an hour, not a second longer. The way he did in Dogville, he says, and the way he did with your mother, I think it was.
When he asked her to marry him.
Yeah, something like that. But if you want to go with him, you better be there, because he says he'll just push on.
I know. I get the message.
All right, I'm on my way. Take care, Miss Grace.
You too, Edward. Edward. Just tell Dad that new times have come to Manderlay.
But no, Grace had no intention of going with her father when he arrived. She had her own life to lead now, and it suited her just fine. But she'd be at the gates anyhow. She just had to show him what she had achieved. A new and better Manderlay.
Mind your hands there. Mind your hands there.
It was examination day for Stanley and the family, because even though things had been going well recently, when Stanley partook of his traditional beer with Mr. Miller, nobody would be able to prevent him from revealing what had happened on the plantation and thereby ruin it all. Willem had been highly skeptical about letting the whites talk to the drivers at all, but Grace had insisted. She trusted them.
Oh, Sammy. Oh, Lord, Sam.
Idiot nigger! Are you totally useless?
Sorry, Mr. Mason.
I'm joking.
Got you.
Stanley Mays and the family passed. That very evening, Grace pronounced them graduate Americans. And although they were free to go, they had elected to stay, as there was talk of hiring the family and Stanley Mays on a permanent basis. And before anybody knew it, the days had passed, and the money was in the bank from where it had been picked up by proud Timothy on horseback. Niels and Sammy had fixed the car, wisely without reference to the manual.
Thank you for everything.
Thank you.
Well, what are you going to do now?
I don't know.
You could always go back to gangstering. Where's Mr. Robinson?
He's been down at camp shaking hands.
Grace was touched by Mr. Robinson's sudden social interest in the former slaves. But it felt right when the car left. It was time for Grace to say goodbye to power.
Brave and strong, thy men and women, better this than corn and wine. Make us worthy, God in heaven, of this goodly land of thine. Hearts as open as our doorways, liberal hands and spirits free. Alabama, Alabama, we will I be true to thee. Stroke my rabbit, Florida.
He's watching you.
No, he's not.
He's watching you.
No, he's not.
I reckon it's something to do with them gangsters leaving. See, honey, when you was boss, he was visiting your kingdom. Now, you're visiting him. I reckon he wants you now.
He should have some dinner. I'm gonna go get him. You come get him? You've got to come and get some dinner.
Be quiet, woman.
Because it's Friday, you get... That's right.
In Mam's bedroom, Grace recalled Flora's worrying, intimate little details. Sexual intercourse amongst the Munsey was determined by ancient traditions. It would not appeal to Grace, Flora had said, not with Grace's modern ideas of equality of people and the sexes. But Grace seemed to have left her progressive attitudes at the table. Now, actually in the situation she had dreamed of, it was all more bizarre than erotic. Anyway, Grace decided to hang on to this opinion.
Timothy, wake up.
Timothy's horse had got out of the stable when fires had been lit around the Manderlay slave quarters while Grace was asleep.
What happened?
I can't tell you. If you want a clear answer, you're going to have to ask somebody else.
The gangsters took the money.
What?
The gangsters took the money. That's the answer. And I reckon it's a pretty clear answer, too.
Certainly is very clear. What makes you think so?
When the party ended, we all left the table to go and take a look at the money. Timothy had hid it behind the red slope. Timothy was meant to be keeping an eye on the place, but he wasn't there. And the box had been pulled up. It was empty. One of the gangsters dug up the money when he was pretending to say goodbye. But he couldn't have done it alone. Someone must have told him where the box was. And Sammy refused to admit it was him, although he'd spent a whole lot of time with Niels. And then everybody started yelling and screaming, and folks is angry and no one's listening. Stanley Mays and the family got away, I believe, although Philomena and Bertie got cut up real bad. Elizabeth is dead, too, although that was mostly by accident.
It was too soon to send the guns away. We weren't quite ready yet.
For once, Grace had nothing to say. She could but reproach herself in silence for her tasteless joke to the gangsters about resorting to their former occupations if things got tight.
Willem, I can't rouse Timothy.
No, I bet you can't. He drank 3 bottles of hooch before we ate.
The Muncie don't drink.
Oh, well, maybe. They do on special occasions.
Well, certainly is lively around here.
Didn't I tell you I didn't want to see you here again?
Well, now, yes, but I've not come to do a deal. I've come to conclude one. And in the hope, of course, that you'll see that I am an honest man. I needn't have come back here to settle up at all. This is your 80%. Quite a tight little sum it is, too, as you can see.
It's the money from our harvest.
Oh, I expect so. It's that time of year. See, I had a little game with a young man who came to see me. And I knew he'd come from here, so I made my humble return. Don't you think that you just might have been wrong about me?
Who did you play for all this money?
That was a day ago now. See, I'd have come sooner, but I passed this black car with some gentlemen in dark coats. They began to follow me, shouting the whole time that I was gonna die, that I was a con man who dealt from the bottom. What an accusation, eh? Well, it just took me a while to get away from them.
Who was it?
The Negro fella arrived on horseback. What was his name?
Timothy.
That was it. Timothy, yeah, that was his name.
He's Muncie. They don't gamble.
Well, no, I know the Muncie don't gamble. I'm a bit of an expert in this field. You have a devil time getting them to the gaming table, no. He was no Muncie. In fact, he's what I call a splendid fellow at the card table. He just stayed being splendid no matter how much he lost.
But he told everyone he was a Muncie.
Oh, of course. See, all the girls were wild about the tales that he told, all the Muncie tales, the proud African, the royal line, you know, all that old-fashioned morality. And the accent, of course. It's on account of that the girls was easy to bed. And I'm not even gonna avail myself of your gratitude. That's just the kind of fella I am, hey-ho. Oh, now, bless me, if I can come up with a motto for the day. They say the Nancy are better hung than the Muncie. Or the Muncie are so upstuck, but the Nancy, how they fuck. Well, then, I'll be seeing you. We can talk business another day.
Grace went straight to the last pages with the tables of personal details on the slaves of Manderlay. Where was Timothy now? Yes, his name had a 1 beside it. A Proudy slave, as she'd read earlier. Or did it? She looked more closely at the handwritten number. She compared it to the 7 next to Elizabeth's name. The pleasant nigger, of the chameleon type, an expert in changing character according to whatever was opportune and what would titillate and enthrall the other person. And then Grace could see it. Timothy's number was not a 1, but a 7. She'd only wanted to read it as a 1. There was even a note beside Timothy's name. Caution. Diabolically clever. Grace had called a final meeting for everybody at Manderlay. For that evening, she had decided to leave the place forever, with her father, when he arrived.
Oh, you're all here.
I persuaded the community to assemble extraordinarily for 2 ballots.
Whatever they involved, they can scarcely have anything to do with me anymore.
Don't be too certain of that, Miss Grace.
Well, I am certain. I've come to say goodbye. And if you've had 2 ballots today, well, oddly enough, that coincides with the 2 presents I've brought. Farewell presents, if you like. The first is this. It's the money from our harvest. Well, actually, it's 80% of it. A card shark kept the other 20% as commission. He scammed the money off of somebody from Manderlay in a game of cards.
So the gangsters didn't take it?
No. No, they didn't. And I won't prolong the tension. It was the treasurer who did it. The man charged with looking after the money. He was overcome by his eagerness to play. Probably because he isn't a Muncie at all, but a Mancy. However unimportant that may sound. Which brings me to my second present. This one, painful to you or not, it has to come out. In this book, which I still regard as the most abominable, contemptible document ever written, Timothy is listed as a pleasin' nigger, a person who can change his appearance to please the beholder, as he has done. Let me find the page.
It's on page 104.
Well, how do you know? I thought no slave had ever seen this book. How do you know what's on page 104 of Man's Law?
'Cause I wrote it. It's all in my meticulous hand. Ma'am and I were very young when the war suddenly ended. And this new statute terrified us.
Terrified you?
We tried to imagine what kind of world were these slaves being let out into? Were they ready for it? Or more correctly, was it ready for them? Legislators promised all kinds of things, but if we didn't believe them, it was then that Ma'am urged me to commit to the paper the way I thought things should be done here if everyone stayed on at Manderlay.
But it's the prolongation of slavery.
Well, you might call it that. You also might call it the lesser of two evils.
But did the others know that you wrote this book?
Groups 2, 3, and 5 always knew. A few members of the other groups were better off not knowing. But everyone knows now. I wrote Ma'am's Law for the good of everyone.
For the good of everyone. For the good of everyone. How dare you? It's a recipe for oppression and humiliation from start to finish.
I think you've been reading it through the wrong spectacles, Miss Grace, if I may take the liberty of saying so.
And then Willem initiated Grace into the humane qualities of the lesser of two evils. Ma'am's Law. How it guaranteed food and shelter and allowed anybody the privilege of complaining about their masters instead of having to blame themselves for the life of no hope that they would surely have to lead in the outside world. How the noonday parade was a blessing since the parade ground was the only place with shade at the warmest time of day. How the numbered groups were determined according to the patterns of behavior that human beings resort to in order to survive in an oppressive community, so that life could be made easier for each of them. Since a proudy nigger, not that Manderlay had seen many, if any of these, survives by perceiving himself as proud and could be helped by this system to believe that he was a bit more persecuted and punished than the others. Since a clowning nigger would benefit greatly from the laughter that Ma'am's Law strictly demanded of his master, just as any other groups benefited from similar obligations. How cash was forbidden, so that gambling had to be done with cotton money to prevent ruination and misery for the families, etc., etc., until Grace's head felt fair ready to explode.
Damn it, Willem, they're not free. That's what matters.
I'd call that a philosophical argument, which neatly brings me to the two ballads I just mentioned. Was Ma'am's Law still relevant? And we agreed that unfortunately it was as relevant now as it ever was. America was not ready to welcome us Negroes as equals 70 years ago, and it still ain't. And the way things are going, it won't be in 100 years from now. So we agreed. We'd like to take one step backward at Manderlay and reimpose the old law.
Excuse me, but I'm going.
As for your going, well, I better tell you about the second of our ballads. As you know, sadly, we lost Ma'am. And unfortunately, we good and well frightened off her descendants. In short, we lack a Ma'am.
No.
I needn't tell you that you received every single vote.
Never.
With all your idealism, I think you could enjoy being the guardian for a kind of menagerie of creatures who have no chance in the wild. Just as you thought the notion of community would be good for us, you were so sure that you permitted yourself to use force to convince us. I'd be sorry if we had to do likewise.
What do you mean? Do you intend to keep me prisoner?
Only till you understand the way you wanted us to understand. The gate has been repaired and is closed. The fences are in good shape, but of course they ain't particularly high. Those fences. Come on. Two men with a rusty shotgun and a toy pistol. How dumb do you really think we are? Too dumb to build a ladder if we really wanted to get away.
Grace had spent a great deal of time on this meeting, which from her point of view didn't seem to be getting anywhere. Her father and his car would be at the gate at 8. That was in half an hour. She had no ladder, and she was on her own and guarded by many. Just how was she to get out of Manderlay? When was a section of the fence always down? Grace would have to change her tactics rapidly if she was to make the rendezvous.
All right. I'll do as you want. Not from my heart, though surely none of you could expect that, but as my only option. And you needn't be scared. I'll obey your beloved law. So, we'd better start by dealing with the present matter. Timothy, a slave from Group 7, has committed a theft that almost ruined us all. As I've determined that Ma'am's law does not prescribe any punishment for stealing money, I shall have to be creative. What was it you once said, Flora? Something about planting a bottle of Rhenish wine? I do believe there's a bottle of Rhenish wine under Timothy's saddle. Don't you?
So that's what I seen when I went there yesterday. If it wasn't a bottle of Rhenish wine.
There was still 10 minutes until her slavishly punctual father would arrive outside to wait for his 15 minutes and not a second longer. Just enough time for a verbal farewell salute.
Timothy, you can stop being proud and silent. Cry. And shout. And beg for mercy. Like the Mancy you are. The Mancy who you despise so much. And it's that hatred, Timothy, and the rest of you bear towards yourselves that you'll never make me accept. You are a cheat of the lowest kind. And Willem, and all of you who follow him are nothing but a bunch of traitors to your race. I hope that your fellow Negroes will one day uncover your betrayal and punish you for it. You make me sick.
I'm sure you're quite right, Miss Grace. Most likely it's impossible to revile us niggers enough. But what I don't get is why it makes you so angry.
What do you mean?
Aren't you forgetting something? You made us.
Probably the only thing that could have stopped the lady with the whip from carrying on forever was the cheerful tinkle that announced her father's presence. She needed his support now. Manderlay, too, really was a place the world would be better off without. Grace recognized her father's handwriting. Dear girl, it said.
Dear girl. So, you tricked your father yet again. I waited the 15 minutes first, but
I am too kind-hearted. So, I popped over to the fence, behind the bushes, and peeked inside to check that you were okay. To my great surprise, it really did look as if you had a good grip on things for once. I'm proud of you, my girl. I hope we meet up someday, so you can tell me what you actually meant by New Times at Manderlay. Love, your dumb old dad.
Ballots could be unrivaled, but determining the time by public debate was rarely feasible. That was quite apparent. Grace had but a few seconds to choose the direction in which to flee away from her swarthy pursuers, who, as her father had so teasingly predicted, were carrying torches. Grace was in a hurry and did not notice Bert, the former fugitive with a liberal attitude to other races who never did make it far. Grace was angry. Manderlay had fossilized in a picture of this country that was far, far too negative. America was a many-faceted place, no doubt about it, but not ready to accept black people. You really could not say that. America had proffered its hand, discreetly perhaps, but if anybody refused to see a helping hand, he really only had himself to blame.
Pulled in just behind the bridge, he lays her down. He frowns, gee, my life's a funny thing. Am I still too young? He kissed her then and there. She took his ring, took his babies. It took him minutes, took her nowhere. Heaven knows he'd have taken anything. All night. She wants a young American. The young American standing right through the picture window. She finds a slinky vagabond. He coughs as he passes, avoiding Mustang. Heaven forbid she'd take anything but the freak and his rifle for nothing. This is a step and cuts his hand, showing nothing. It swoops like a song. She cries, where have all Papa's heroes gone? All night. She wants a young American. The young American, all the way from Washington. Her breadwinner begs off the bathroom floor. We live for just these 20 years. Do we have to die for the 50 more? And all night, he wants the young American. Young American, young American. He wants the young American. All right, but he wants the young American. President Nixon, do you remember the bills you have to pay, or even yesterday? Have you been on America? Just you and your idle symbols, that's so loud. Leather, leather, everywhere. Not a miss left from the ghetto. Well, would you carry your things, sir? Just in case of depression. Sit on your hands on the bus of survivors, blushing at all the Afro-sealers.